afternoon. My name is Inês, and thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to welcome you. And I'm here today to have a conversation with Bjorn Christensen, who's joining us via Zoom, and Ricardo Gomes, and they're both the artists who are responsible for the piece Fish Cube that is exposed in Mosteiro de Tibanes, which I hope you've had the chance to see. And so Bjorn Christensen is a painter and visual artist for the collective Superflex, which is a collective whose work is centered on collaboration and exploring alternative social modes of organization. And they're particularly interested in the idea of coexistence and interspecies coexistence. And Ricardo Gomes, an architect from KWI Studio, the studio is also very interesting because it's also focused on the idea of collaboration. And I think that's something I would hope that we would speak about a little later. And that's it. And then, so I know that Bjorn is able to show us the piece. You have the pictures there. If we could show, because I'd love if maybe we could start, and both of you could talk a little bit about the piece Fish Cube. With some photos.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yep, Bjorn, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm in a little island called Møn, in the countryside, south of Denmark. So I'm okay. I was a bit sick. That's why I'm not present with you guys. But I'm here now.
Well, we hope you're feeling better, and it's great to have you this way, either way. And yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe I'll just one little correction. You said I was a painter, and I wouldn't describe myself as a painter. But we also do paintings. But I think it's quite important, just a little step to start with that, Superflex is a collective. So it's three people, 31 years coming together and very fast rejecting the idea of the artist as the genius. We don't really trust that concept. We don't feel comfortable with it. We don't believe in it in any way. So therefore we formed the collective body Superflex. And that has now expanded to be many, many more humans and also other species. So the work we present here, Fish Cube, let's see if I can, I am not there and was not there. So these are photos that I was sent, right, from Ricardo and the team and Index. So let's see if it works out. This okay? Okay. So yeah, the work is called Fish Cube. And already here, there's a bit of an indicator of that it's not only about humans. So a lot of Superflex practice going from the singular perspective to the collective, now talking about interspecies living. So in the studio, we not only thrive in friction, but we think that the best idea might come from a fish. So this has been going on for the last 6-7 years, this focus on interspecies living. So the work presented here that we developed together with KWI, a long collaborator of Superflex in several large and smaller projects, is to develop material, a sculptural material that is both for humans and for fish and other species. Let's say particularly our focus is on the ocean. So when sea level rises, we not only need to welcome, it is also obvious that we engage with those who rise with the sea level. So we have developed a method or some parameters. We call it Fish Architectural Manifesto, or Interspecies Manifesto, where we, among others, have learned from fish behavioral experts, from studying creatures in the sea, that one of the things that is very important is to maximize surface. And you need to create cracks and holes so that life can develop around this. Obviously, a cube is something that we humans are deeply fascinated by, that we can put things on top and we can make buildings and so on. But when you look at nature, it's not so much that it has straight lines and it's rigid and strict. And So one of the other points is also the right angle is the wrong angle. So we don't believe in, just transferring the idea of ownership to sea life or ocean life. So FishCube is a cube that is divided and cut so that we don't lose, let's say, material. We don't take away material. And then it's a modular system, so we can create many different forms and shapes that we humans can engage with. This is from the site. I don't know where you're sitting now, but this is in the vicinity of the monastery. So it's 4 pieces that can then be combined in a multitude of ways, both for humans to engage with initially. We often say to engage with as art or in public space, and to sit on and talk and think about what does interspecies life mean. And they are here. Here we've used marble from Portugal. This Ricardo can say a bit more about. But as you can see here, there are several different ways of setting up the sculpture.
And that is something I wanted to ask you, and we met in the Mosteiro by chance today, and so I learned a little bit about this, but I was surprised to learn that this is all the same cube. So even though you have 3 different pieces and 3 different ways in which they're shown, that we're talking about the same structure each time. Is that right?
Yeah, so it starts with this cube, and then when you open it up, you have 4 identical parts, and then then you combine them. So you can combine them in Bjorn referred to it, unlimited, probably countless ways of, you can. So this work you see here is done from the exact same 4 pieces as the cube is made of. Yeah.
And can you say something about the cut? Because Bjorn has already mentioned that this is the way that you can maximize the surface. Is that right? So the way that you cut, can you talk a little bit about how you do it and what the thought behind it was?
Yes. So the geometry itself was a response to, as Bjorn referred to, research that has been ongoing for quite some time, and there are many ways of doing this, but what we tried with this particular work was to find a way in which we could cut a cube of stone. It could be whatever dimension, so it was more of a geometrical exercise. How could we cut it and the resulting pieces would have as much surface, or the ratio between surface and volume would be pending towards the maximum amount of surface. And how could we do that in a simple way and also without any waste? So I guess what's interesting about it is that you take a cube, you cut it twice with a wire, and then you end up with these 4 pieces. And of course it's a bit of a mind game. It's difficult to actually understand it, but it's very simple. So it's simple to produce, and the result is unexpected, right? So there's some curious shapes and forms that come out depending on how you put it together.
Let me just add, so it's often also, so we've a little step back. So 6 years ago, I believe it is, Superflex was asked to be expedition leaders of a ship in the Pacific by an organization called TBA 21 Academy. And they asked us if we would like to explore the ocean and the sea. We said, yes, that's quite an interesting residency to get. So it was intended to be over 3 years. And we immediately, thought that, because we came across that there was a lot of action going around Tonga in the Pacific, around deep sea mining. That is now becoming, quite a thing. Not so many people talk about it, but it's, again, humans exploring and maybe running out of ways to find rare metals that we can use in our transformation for, changing how we consume energy. But it just leaves again an unknown part of the world. Humans know very, very little about the deep sea. But just the idea about, again, going and exploring like humans do, like maniacs, for rare metals. And then we said, okay, then we'll like to explore the deep to try and understand what is actually in the ocean. So we called it deep sea minding. And that became then the topic and working method that we then engaged with fish behavioral experts from the Max Planck Institute, some guys from NASA, Japanese scientists who had developed a way of creating artificial gills so humans would be able to breathe underwater and so forth. So that was the beginning. And once you dive in, you dive deep, then of course, naturally, you have to listen, you have to cultivate, you have to be idle, you have to learn, and then you can start thinking, okay, maybe there's a way of transforming how we humans build on land and not just are so focused on pushing away what is coming. And therefore, this architectural manifesto with, among others, the need to maximize surface. Probably everyone has, if you haven't been diving, but maybe you walk on the beach, you take up a stone in the sea, and there's already a lot of organisms that have attached to this tiny little stone. And that is actually what means a maximizing. So the more surface you create, the more life can attach to any kind of object in the ocean. The most famous are, of course, when a ship sinks that has metal, maybe wood, and so on, all kinds of different materials, then a multitude of life happens within that, let's call it object or universe of the sunken ship.
And so, but the thing is, so you were mentioning earlier, like these fish cubes for us humans would work as art. Is there a chance, like, would you consider, or do you talk about or think about the idea of building in this way? Maybe not with marble, because I imagine that would be expensive, but so that this would be an actual kind of building block for human structures. Because obviously we can't coexist with fish right now. So until we have fake gills, I don't think we will be able to. So is there a way of making these the fish cubes also building structures for humans that we could actually live or work or?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that it is actually going rather fast. So let's just imagine that we all the lower parts of our infrastructure, also the one that goes into the sea. For example, when you're at a harbor, you have a harbor front. We build all these structures so we can dock with our boats and so on. We build bridges and so on. So what is below is the structure that holds the human infrastructure. So there, of course, you can build in a way so that it actually creates holes and cracks and so forth. That is creating life systems, life buildings, fish architecture. So yes, we have done quite a lot of experiments with scientists in Denmark. The Technological Institute in Denmark placed similar objects, a little bit different, but again with the same concept in the harbor of Copenhagen, and testing out how organisms engage with them. So it is really, thinking again interspecies living, the expanded collective from day one. So any kind of material we as humans put on, make our buildings with, our structures with, we can easily think them of including, for example, circulation. Humans need circulations for air. We also want to be able to, pass from one to the other. So that will become functional structures for ocean life also once water is rising. So we're doing scientific experiments. We are also proposing buildings, structures, and so on. And often, or how we see an artist role, it is really with this, let's call it persuasion of looking at this beautiful object. Humans will go towards it, touch it, sit on it. And then at the same time, talk about a fish cube or fish architecture or interspecies living next to it. Then people might start to think, okay, maybe there's a way of a coexistence from the very first stones that we lay into the ground or into the sea that are meant for us to have our infrastructures. Why not push it already that far that we engage with the concept of an interspecies living, interspecies design, architecture, economy, and so forth?
There is this idea of democratizing public space in a way that democracy would also include other species. We speak, for example, of intergenerational democracy, where we have to represent future generations. And so could we also think of democracy as including other species? And how would that work for public space? And I'd like to ask you, Ricardo, how can you think in a technical way, how could we build and use public space in a way that would listen to and pay attention to other species' interests? How can we democratize public space to also include other species?
Well, I guess Björn was referring to a series of other projects that we've that we've been working with Superflex, and I guess there's these two sides. What Björn was saying now, right at the end, that of course, there's a metaphorical aspect to it. Which in this work in Tibange can also be assisted by the listening of these sound files. Maybe you can talk a bit about that later, Björn.
Yes.
But Björn mentioned that there's also a scientific aspect to it, and there's some material research going into. So, I mean, the building of artificial reefs or structures that can, in the particularly with marine life, of course, this is a very advanced field. No? So there's many people looking into this. I guess what Superflex is doing, and together here, is bringing it into the fore of, so taking it out of the ocean and bringing it into public space may both, on the one hand, make people think about it, but also in a more perhaps dystopian view, if the sea level does rise all the way, then of course it would be good that these structures would already be there. I mean, I know that Superflex is working on a number of actual reef projects, so projects where the structures are meant to be at use right now, right? But you can also think that anything you build close to the coast, and that's true for Portugal as it is for Denmark, is already in this transitory or transient state, right? Because the sea level is rising, right?
But even like, for example, in our houses, the birds nest sometimes under the roofs. Could we build in a way that welcomes this kind of interspecies living? Is there a way of thinking of building or using public space in ways that, as Superflex has been saying, and I think as you've also collaborated, is not so human-centric, and so that it does take into account that we are sharing this space, and public space shouldn't just be human space?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it is happening slowly, right? I mean, in Portugal, it happens a lot with the cigognas, how do you say that?
Storks.
Storks.
Yeah, that supposedly bring babies in.
The nests are protected, and so the electrical companies have to build structures to basically make storks nest in places other than the high tension lines. So this is slowly happening. I guess the idea of embracing other species rather than seeing architecture as a defensive structure. No?
No, but we are totally interdependent. You know, this is also becoming more and more obvious for everyone. But yet, so we can sit and agree in this room about it. But if you want to take it often a notch further, then what artists do, or the kind of artists we do, is that we both engage with public space. So we've done parks, like urban parks, 1 kilometer long park, where we engage with the citizens living in the area and having them define the park together with us, being represented and therefore creating ownership. Similar, why not think about that the next parks we do? Obviously, we all are afraid of the gigantic storms coming, and with that sea level rise. So the new cities are also being built so that they can also, accumulate large numbers of water and so on and so on. But I think we can take it even further notch, and so it is very much about changing perspective, and that is what we in the studio have also learned throughout our practice of 31 years. And particularly now with our focus in the ocean and learning from the sea. But of course, something happens when you take it to next level. So, for example, we were fortunate to, I think it was 2021 maybe, during the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly in New York. So, politicians, I hope you can see this image here. Can you see this image?
We can't. No,
Nope.
we're still on the PDF.
Okay, let me do like this. Does it work now? Can you see
Yes.
image from New York?
We see something projected on a building.
Okay, so this is an image from New York. The politicians are in there at the UN General Assembly, and they put up this big topic, biodiversity. And then we are at the same time invited to engage with this topic and the building, and also with Central Park. During our diving in the ocean in the Pacific, particularly the Coral Sea, we took a night dive, and we came across. So you dive in there, and it's pitch dark, and it's a little scary, to say the least, because we are just floating, not knowing what goes on. And then you turn on the light, turn on the lamp, and all of a sudden you have billions of small creatures swimming around you, close to you, and moving and way. They are kind of jelly organisms. They're called siphonophores. And they are very interesting because they are part of the world's largest vertical migration that happens every year, every night, and trillions come up to the surface. They feast up there, eat everything on the surface. So they are also what they call the blue carbon. So they are cleaning what humans pollute, but also taking material away and then taking it down to the seabed, and thereby storing carbon dioxide and so forth. So we thought that was quite an interesting creature, particularly when humans want to talk about biodiversity and not a temperature not rising more than 2 degrees, the consequences of it, but not taking into account other species' perspective. Of course, that's also a bit of a mental game that you need to really be able to. But we then filmed this creature, and we made an animation from it, and we projected it 140 meters onto the building. So while politicians are discussing, this creature is present. Here's some other images of it. I think I can show a little film. I'm not sure if this one will work. It does not, so I'll just go back again. Sorry. So having this creature there enables humans, hopefully, then to think about how this idea about biodiversity must be for other creatures.
Yeah, and that's one question that we do have is like, how can we represent other species? Like, how can we learn to listen to other species' interests and what they need in terms of building, but also what they need or what their interests are in terms of their coexistence with us? And I know that Superflex has also worked. There was a biologist with Alex Jordan, and there were some other people. So if you could speak a little bit about that, about the effort or the work to listen to other species and to understand what it is that they do need or what they want as far as their coexistence with us.
It's again like all of there's a lot of science out there, and so it is basically to listen and learn from scientists, but also often you also need to dive in yourself to be able to really have that transformative experience. So Superflex has always worked with scientists. We work with Ricardo. He's a specialist. He's an architect, among others. So it's always been part of our practice to learn and listen, and then transform our own concept and ideas. And then our job is then to transform that into let's call it persuasive, either a park or a space in a museum and so forth. So here we call this interspecies assembly at the UN. So basically bringing together humans and asking humans to act idle, to take a pause, and hopefully then humans are able to dream. We are also able to imagine, and maybe that's our strongest both. Strength, and maybe also one of our biggest problems, is that we can imagine everything. also in fantasy and imagination. So therefore, any kind of prosperity is also a grand potential. But the beautiful of it is that we can imagine. And Ricardo mentioned it before. So as part of our project with the Fish Cube, there's a way that you can listen to different podcasts that we have recorded. Among others, Alex Jordan, the fish behavioral expert, is giving you an introduction to his way of looking at life in the ocean. And there are different ones. Speaking, there's also one who talks about the law, all the direction that is now happening with giving agency, but also legal rights to oceans, to rivers, to other animals. So there's a lot happen. And to those you can listen to while you walk in the forest. You can also be hypnotized. So we've made a script together with a hypnotist, so you can transform yourself to a fish and a coralline algae. This is actually the reason for most of our ocean objects being pink. It's a coralline. It's a pinkish algae that coral polyps are very attracted to. You can also become a polyp and so on. So using the power of imagination and hallucination, let's call it persuasion, hopefully enables us to change perspective. And that you can download and listen to while you walk or sit in the fish cubes.
And Interspecies Assembly was a piece that you worked together as well with Ricardo and Superflex, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, that's right, yes. That was also produced here in Portugal. And
here, yeah. Go
no,
ahead.
I was just going to say that, I mean, of course, here, let's say the Fish Cube is a little bit of an evolution, just in the sense that the material use is, let's say, more sustainable. But, of course, these artworks that were at Central Park in New York, they have a contract. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the contract, Björn?
Yes, so Superflex has worked a lot with contracts. Maybe that's also why we made a podcast also with a lawyer talking about other species rights. So here, before you enter, it is carved onto the structure, a contract between humans and other species. So the singular human. So you read that, and the contract really says that we motivate you when you walk in to act idle, to take pause and to stay there, and then hopefully cultivate what you learn. So of course it's an imaginary exercise, but while you're in there, and humans do set up and have done throughout human existence, kind of assemblies, circles where we gather, and there we let people speak. And we disagree and we have encounters, but of course it's difficult to have encounters with someone who doesn't speak like other species. Therefore, we have to turn on other senses, to be able to do this. So it's a contract carved into the stone, and then you're invited to spend a minimum amount of time in the assembly. And that was parallel to the politicians sitting inside the UN General Assembly.
And that is an interesting question. How do we listen to species that don't speak, or at least don't speak the languages that we're used to speaking to each other? And so when you're building Ricardo, how do you listen to what the species or other species might want?
Well, I guess, like Björn was saying, we have to rely on scientists, and the science is there, right? So in this particular work for Central Park in New York, the size of the holes is in relation with different type of fish species, and the texture of the stone. So there's different textures in different sides of the artworks to promote better conditions for particular species. So we go and talk to specialists to understand what exactly would be more favorable for this cohabitation.
And that is really interesting because we tend to think, and this was something I heard in one of those podcasts you're speaking about, the Interspecies Cafe and Superflex's website, that we're tending to think that nature doesn't have a voice, but it does have a voice. We just need to learn how to listen to it in a different way. And so that is part of maybe the work that humans have to do, is to learn to listen. And Donna Haraway, a feminist philosopher, had also mentioned this. And so, but I know that we sometimes speak, or Bjorn and Superflex, you speak of building, for when the sea waters rise, but perhaps in a more optimistic view, can we think of ways in which we can coexist? Can we think of an ethics of coexistence that could happen right now, and what would that be? Because we tend to think of ethics starting from individuals, right? So individuals have rights and they have duties, but if we think of an interspecies coexistence, then maybe we have to start from somewhere else. So instead of starting from individuals, we have to start from a more connected. Can we think of ways and how that could work?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is why we at the studio talk about interspecies living or interspecies relationship. So we at the studio, we are now 20 people, are exercising it in our practice. So when we choose materials to build from and so on, we try to use materials that have a multitude of possibilities and surfaces, as Ricardo says, and so forth. So we also, again, work on use contracts in the work. So maybe another one that also would link for that. So it's an interspecies campus. It's a campus in Denmark. It's called Roskilde University, and their focus since the 70s has been on the collective. So studying the collective, democracy, the collective, participation, and so forth. But their place is very much, I think I maybe have an image of it from above. So their place is a very grid-rigid system. So we basically said to them, if you really want to, again, also change the way you move, you may behave, so we have to disrupt the way that you go from A to B. So before you walk into the central, the cafe, I guess you can see this one, the auditorium and so forth, you have to walk through the structure. So you have to not walk from A to B in a straight line, but you have to walk in different directions. So there we also used, hypnosis, and we did engage with and had, faculty members and so forth transform and try to imagine life as another species, and then proposing all over campus to implement these different types of structures where humans could sit down and think. But maybe the most important in the direction that you are saying is that we also created the interspecies campus contract, where we thought that this is a university setting here. So to discuss, so what is interspecies ethics? I actually don't know what it is. I have some ideas about it, but only through setting, structures and settings and organizations, we are able to, force ourselves to actually discuss this. And if we then parallel also try to motivate architects, those who construct materials. So here we work with the best brick makers in Denmark, that you normally are used to make bricks for big buildings or cladding onto concrete. We said we will not make any straight bricks. We will only do curved bricks. So we with Ricardo developed 12 different types of bricks that could only do curved structures. And also here you can see that the surfaces are sometimes a little more slick, but most of the time they have a lot of possibilities for interfaces, so that bees, insects, plants, and so on can easily attach to it. So that is a direct way of motivating, the industries of building in a different way, by persuading and motivating, not only on an intellectual way, but actually making bricks that you can build with.
Yeah, I was mentioning it right at the beginning that in KWI Studios description, you speak not of being a studio of architecture, but where architecture is the means where you get a collaboration. Your main goal is collaboration. And so this is also another way of thinking about an interspecies ethics that starts not from the standpoint of individuals, but where the focus is actually collaboration. And so it's cooperation. Can you speak about, I thought that was really interesting that the main focus of your studio is collaboration and that architecture is a means or an instrument for that.
Yeah, it's the process is what motivates us, right? I mean, of course, always with the idea of an end result, but the idea that every process is different and that whoever you're collaborating with, there will be different, or let's say, surprising results, right? So that's how we approach every project. And of course, with Superflex, we've been brought into this idea of working with other species. Like Björn mentioned, this expedition that Superflex was responsible for organizing 6 years ago or 7 years ago. Since then, we started having this debate on what is fish architecture, what marine species would want to have as design. Should we be able to communicate? So I think, so you were trying to bring the collaborative aspect of our practice towards the collaboration with...
It's to think of an ethics, where we tend to think of ethics traditionally, and I think that this is our inheritance, our conceptual way of thinking is we think of ethics as a way of talking about relationships between individuals. And maybe one way of talking about interspecies ethics is to stop thinking that we are individuals, because even as far as our identities, we're not actually individuals, like we're a composite of microorganisms, each of us walking around, right, and transmitting germs to each other and all of this. And so the idea is that maybe through the idea of collaboration as work, can we also start thinking of another way where we're not thinking about KWI Studio and Superflex, two entities working together, but it's the collaboration. So collaboration is another model of thinking about relationships.
Yes, I mean, there's an interesting process that we've also been developing with Superflex that has to do with, there are like more participatory processes with children. Björn, we've done a number of projects where we've sort of changed a little bit the paradigm, and we actually work with kids. This is Play Contract. It's a project in Denmark that started from a group of kids proposing a playground for adults to play. And they did so by building a number of models with Lego bricks. And then, so it was a different form of collaboration in the sense that what we did then with Superflex was that we took all these brick models, these Lego models, and then worked with them, developing, let's say, a sculptural language for this playground for adults. So I guess, Björn, we need to take this, radicalize this idea of collaboration and try to actually physically collaborate with other species. I guess that's not been tested yet.
So just Ricardo was just mentioning here, I hope you can see this, right? Can you see the Play Contract by Superflex?
We can't see the Play Contract. We can only see the photograph, and then there's a blank page.
Oh, okay. I'm just jumping around here. Sorry about that. So this one is for Ricardo. Can you see the pink Lego bricks on the right?
Yes.
So this was that's the project Ricardo talks about. So children were invited to propose buildings or structures that would motivate grown-ups to actually continue being playful. So they would do all these structures and would also give words. So among others, every child was always mentioning, time. When you grow up, the main excuse you always have is time and also perspective. So the children were saying, but we need to make a contract here that fulfills what actually says in UN, the children's right to play. There's actually something like that in law. So they proposed all these structures, and with Ricardo we analyzed them, And then we came up with these large-scale structures that is then now in the park. But I fully agree. You know, I guess maybe the most important is that we. I'm just going back again here to. I don't know if you can see that change I made. Probably not. But if I just to fit onto what you said before. So here, what you said before. So yes, we are a multitude of things in our bodies. You know, there's tiny things that define us from ending up being feminine or masculine. Being so many things. So we are, as you say, germs and so on. And there's so many things going on in our bodies and any other organism. So we need to acknowledge that first to be able to truly maybe even talk about something, like democracy. But it is that we have to acknowledge in our own bodies that we are a collective that is forming this vessel. And I'm just putting this creature out here because that is actually a collective body. So it's called zooids, many individuals that live as one. So some of them actually are the ones that are breathing. Some is like a warrior, catching food and so on and so on. So there are many individuals within one. And it's the same with coral polyps, coral reefs. And each single little coral polyp are part of a collective body that then forms the most amazing grand infrastructure. So it's not so difficult, I would say, for humans then too, because we're all fascinated about coral reefs. So if we look at them and we play with them and we engage with them, then I don't think it's so difficult for us to transform our mindset into also thinking our own bodies with a lot of other humans, being a multitude of complexity and madness and love and whatever, and then focusing on the collective, because that is, after all, how we have, developed, and how every single individual, goes from a singular perspective to becoming a family, friends, a city, a bigger thing, and so on and so on. So it's not too difficult to give full attention on the collective. But of course, maybe first we need to understand that our own bodies are a complex web of many organisms.
Yeah, and I'm going to open the floor for questions very soon. So if you want to start thinking about your questions or commentaries. And I just wanted to say, because you mentioned the word earlier, participation. And we are, of course, already involved in collectives because families are collectives and cities are collectives. And we understand that these units are units of a collective. So we participate in them. And that's what, the ethics of a city is how we participate in it. We're free, not because we're individuals, but because we can contribute and make our city what we want. And so the thing is, how do we now transform this? We have collectives, human collectives, our families and our cities. How can we think about an ethics of participation that understands us as part of a multi-species collective or an interspecies collective?
First of all, of course, you need to, if you want to understand what is in the sea, you need to dive in. So you need to jump in. So it's not only an intellectual exercise. Most humans on this planet have agreed upon how important the well-being of bees are, right? Because without healthy bees, then we don't have much of plants and food and so forth to humans. So. And most can understand that. So we most are also motivated to make holes and stuff into a piece of wood and can see what goes on there. So those. And as an artist, we make concept. We also make shapes and forms that hopefully can motivate at a transformation. And here I'm, one thing, and I do think it's a little bit difficult often to say it, but I do think persuasion is part of this. That's why, the fish cube is, you touch it, it is quite nice to touch, it is nice to sit on and so forth. So there has to be those levels. So it's not only an intellectual exercise. And that's where, among others, artists, architects and so forth, form and shape makers and and public space makers have quite a big responsibility in motivating and persuading us to take that extra step into another unknown world.
How do you think of participation when you do collaboration work? How do you think of participation, or how do you conceive? Do you think of it as individuals? Do you think about the end result?
I think in this project that Björn just showed in Billund, the objective while we were working on these structures was to make sure that at the end, everyone who had participated in this process, this 164 or 5 kids, would feel as if they had been part of the process. And I guess, so as we were designing these works, the concerns were of a very practical nature, right? Was how can we capture as many elements and as many, or an impression somehow. So, and of course, when the opening took place and we saw these kids finally approaching the sculptures and the fact that they could all identify their own work, that was, I guess, the measure of success. So it was a very particular process in that case. But of course, Superflex has more experience with this also in public space with Superkillen. Perhaps you can talk about that, Björn. Like this sense of how can you motivate a community. Sometimes it's not just one person, but it's a culture, right? To have this sense of belonging with a particular space.
No, but it comes naturally from, again, sorry to go back to it, going from singular perspective, 3 single artists, very at the beginning, even before we did one stroke, if I was a painter, already deciding to work collectively. So totally erasing the identity of every single of us to the collective body. So already there you are transforming and naturally accepting that the collective practice, both for my own individual, being curious, wanting to know, learn from what the others think, and a very fast experience that we together, not only the 3 of us, but everyone else we engage with, can do so much more. And that has then filled through everything we actually do as Superflex. Also to a big park in Copenhagen where we work with 70 different nationalities in creating a large-scale park, a 1 kilometer park. But for us it's natural. I actually don't know other way. I also don't want to actually engage with any other way because this is what I believe in, and I've learned so much from so many other people, individuals, species, and so forth. So I would be a poor person if I did not go on this exploration every day.
And it is a beautiful idea to think that we are part of a collective and we feel part of a collective and we belong when we feel that we've been recognized, that our voice is part of the myriad collective voices that we are now a part of that whole. And so with that in mind, I'm going to open the floor to the people here. Does anyone have questions or commentaries?
I actually often call that proposal power.
Proposal power.
So now I'm hoping someone will take that power.
Yes, please.
And propose something, right?
So the proposal power is being taken up very shyly, or not being taken up.
All right.
Mm-hmm. So maybe you can tell us more about how you found that, for example, in that 1 kilometer park you were just mentioning, how have you found developing that work with different communities and with different, what we would call different identities, how we can make that recognition work and that belonging?
Let me see if I can just find it here. So it's called Superkillen, and it's this one here. Can you see this one here?
Yeah.
The red square. So it was a 1 kilometer long old industrial area. There used to be a train station, train track. And it was an area that was really recognized. This is back in 2008. There because it's an area of so many different nationalities, different economic, let's call it statuses of people living in the area. So it was a lot of fighting and a lot of struggle around. So the city and an organization that is focused on public space, a foundation, wanted to make a competition and see if there was a way of dealing with this. And the first information we got was that there were 70 different nationalities. So we developed this project with an architect firm called BIG, or Bjarke Ingels Group, and landscape architects from Germany called Topothek. So it became, first of all, a very simple concept. Copenhagen is very homogeneous, so it looks very neat and beautiful, particularly at that point. There was only one bench, the Copenhagen bench, that you could use. Of course, we wanted to, challenge this, among others, by saying let's do 3 very significant large-scale spaces. One called the Red Square, one called the Black Square, and one the whole green long park. And then we asked everyone in the area to propose objects, city objects from memory, of desire, from a travel. And then we engaged with the public in the area in multitude ways for 2-3 years and collected proposals. So there now you have here a Moroccan fountain. You have this is from Lina Bobardi, great architect from Sao Paulo. Someone sent us a photo from Doha in Qatar of a street, and there we saw this dentist tooth, and then that became a lamp, and so forth. So it's a multitude of many objects. So one of the most important was then, so we followed the normal rules for how you engage with the public. So you have to engage with representatives from different organizations, which is what people then call participation and democracy. We struggle quite hard with that because it's often men between 60 and 70 years old who are representing these groups and say, we need more trees, we need to do this and that, and this is not right. And then we basically engage with that, but at the same time we developed something we call participation extreme. So we would actually go around, we'll talk to people, and through the Danish Arts Agency, we said we'd like to do 7 experiments. We would like to go and work with groups, and particularly young and elderly, because they are those who use the park mostly. And then ask them if they would like to travel somewhere to collect an object and bring it back. So having that experience of being directly involved in developing the space. So actually this hill here, you see here, the Black Hill, we went with 2 young girls of Palestinian descent, and they had never been to Palestine. Their grandmother lived there, and I'm just going back here, and they said, if a Palestinian person or Palestinian descent goes to Palestine, then they bring back a little glass of soil. We'd like to bring back a lot of soil. And we said, that was back in 2009, there had just been another intifada. We said, that's not going to be really easy, but nevertheless, we have a lot of friends out there in this region, so we went along. And then they brought back 4 cubic meters of soil that now forms the hill of Superkilen. And everyone in the area knows these stories, how these 2 young girls went traveling. There were 2 elderly who wanted to have a line dance pavilion. They went to Texas and so on. And an important part, I don't know if it's actually here. No, here you have them. So those are the 2 girls. So this is now, and there's a sign that says soil from Gaza. So every object, also you can see here, has a reference. This, of course, comes very much from the art world. So from Marcel Duchamp, he takes the pissoir, puts it in the museum, and asks us to look at it in a different way. So here, every object also has a story, among others, from a sign that in Arabic says soil from Palestine and jord in Danish. So you can look at it as a function, or you can also engage with the imaginary thinking about how life is in Gaza currently. So this is participation extreme. It's playful. It's a way of using public space in a very different way, and it's very similar how we motivate now with we call it super reef. So there's a concept of restoring reef around Denmark, because Denmark doesn't have mountains. So therefore, we have been stone harvesting in the ocean for many, many years. So actually taking all the stones out of the seabed, so we could build our houses, our streets, and so forth. And of course, the consequences of that is that there's nothing then left in the sea for organisms to attach to. So we launched that as a large-scale artwork, a total artwork, to restore those 55 square kilometers of reef, of stone reef. So that's a little bit of similar idea. So we ask everyone to tap in with their knowledge and so on, so forth. We have one idea about how to do it, and the other people have different ideas. But everyone need a collective ambition. It's a little bit similar in the UN when, the Kyoto Agreement, we say, okay, we insist on that the temperatures cannot rise more than 2 degrees. Not many will fulfill it, but at least it's a collective, let's say, message or contract that we can put in the face of each other. So similar here.
And it is because when we tend to think of ethics, and one of the concepts we talk about is freedom, we tend to think about as individual freedom, positive freedom or negative freedom, freedom from being interfered with, or freedom to do something, but always as individuals. But when we speak of projects like this, or even when we speak of cities and families, that's not the freedom that we think about. We think of freedom to participate, to have a voice, to be a part of something that's bigger than just us.
Yeah. So basically what it has created is a very strong sense of ownership in the area. So nothing is ever broken. It's been there for, was done in 2012, so 13 years now. So no one breaks stuff. People take care of it and are proud of it in this area. For some, it looks like a civilization of public space, too many things that are weird and whack. But it represents the plurality and the strong collective that is in that area.
And so again, now we have a question by Liliana. So if we could have.
Hello, thank you for this conversation. I have a question, but I'll try to formulate it because it's something that it's arriving while I'm listening to you, and also with memories that I have of some first contacts with Superflex work. And for me, Superflex some years ago was a lot about social work, sociability, and this is now extending the idea of sociability to other species. And I was listening about this in the beginning. Inês mentioned this in this project that it's presented now at the Biennale. You are addressing a space in terms of coexistence, but it's at the same time it's a space where we cannot live. Women cannot live there because it's the sea. But we are working the conditions in order to allow others to live. Also, I was thinking there is a work that you did like 10 years ago, I think more or less, that appeared to me that happens also in the sea, and it's this film that works with the border of Mayotte in the Kwanza. And this is so I would like to bring this more political. It's political what we are speaking, but I want to perhaps to highlight this. I like this because in this film you are working with the most deadly frontier of Europe, and something that we never speak. We don't speak a lot about this because we always speak about Mediterranean. But in fact, in the Ocean Indian, it's where you have really a place where this coexistence, not interspecies, but really between humans and between different. So there is a kind of very, very strong frontier. And it's also the ocean. So I'm not sure if my question is clear, but these things were resonating also. How do you address also these things of creating conditions ethical conditions of ethical relationships in places like this. How did you address this in your work?
Yeah, again, I think it starts again with, moving away from your singular perspective and then looking at the collective and then believing truly that as a collective we can influence everything. So, for example, the film you're referring to is called Kwasa Kwasa. I can maybe it's better just to show a little clip of it. I will do so. That's all right.
Ripara uhuru watu o mwaka 1975 iberamu yatu inanyoranne ikao zivingi masiwa yomane nzuani ngazija mwali na maore.
So again, we were. It's a little crazy sometimes, but we were fortunate enough to be invited to work with 3 hospitals in 2 islands, 2 former French colonies, or still French, Ile de Réunion and Mayotte, and there were 3 hospitals they wanted us to engage with. So while we're out there working with people working in the hospital, doctors, patients, and so on, we focused on a work where we would look at medicinal plants, trying to create focus on the conflict between that in those areas you have these fantastic forests and so on. So what people normally do first is to go and treat themselves with plants. But when they enter the hospital, or let's say the white man's or the French hospital, then there's a clash of civilizations. They cannot really communicate together. So there's a fight that appears. I'm not going to talk so much about that, but Mayotte is interesting because it used to be part of the Grand Comore. And in the 70s, there was an election where they could decide if they wanted to remain French or wanted to become independent. There was then a very strong movement among particular women. It's very Muslim there. They decided to stay French. But that means that now today, the outermost region of the EU is Mayotte, which is deep out there in the Indian Ocean. That means that people from the other islands in the area who are not part of the EU try to get to the EU through this very dangerous waters, coral reefs. And they are brothers and sisters. There used to be 7 islands that are, together, that were together as Grand Comore. But then one island chose to remain French, ergo also remain within the European border. So very far out there. So we got to know this, and they were talking about that particularly a shaky boat called a Kwasa Kwasa, which means a shaky boat, were constructed to have people at night travel from one island to another. There's only 30 kilometers, but it's hardcore, big oceans, and there's reefs around. So tens of thousands of people have died by trying to get there. So we decided to work with one of the guys who are building the boats and made a film about that, then called Kwasa Kwasa, where you follow the whole production of this boat and then how it sets into the ocean. So we've often used the medium of film in our practice. And this was very much, it was us out there doing another thing, but then we had to respond. So then we found ways. We were not really allowed to, but we found ways of making this film, even though the commissioner, the hospital system of France did not really like that we brought attention to it. Because of course doctors are the first ones who are confronted with if someone makes it into Mayotte. And it's often pregnant women. Actually, they put them on a boat and then they send them off, and hopefully they then land in Mayotte. They give birth. The woman is sent back to Mayotte, and the children stay. So we basically had to make that film. It is accessible on our website. You can watch it another time.
Okay, yeah, that is incredible.
But of course, that's also about borders, and I think that was also the point before the question, right? So what do we do with lawless borders? First of all, they are social constructions, and to some degree, they are also imaginary until they are no longer imaginary, and that's the same with the border between humans, other species, and so forth.
Yeah, and we mentioned, I mean, because on the one hand, we want to say that we are just one species among so many, and so we need to lose our human-centric perspective. But on another level, we have to recognize that we have a special responsibility as human beings. And so in that way, we have to own that. We can't just say that we're another species and that fish should do some of the work as well.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe I just, there was just one I didn't show before, Ricardo. I'm just going to share this one here. I'm sorry, I'm a little messy. I'm here on the, so this is just to show you. So this is more or less this is the beginning of, can you see this image of a lot of fish and so on?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of this. Let's call it super reef, and the beginning of the fish cube. So really trying to develop structure, a design that would have this conversation playfully between humans and what is in the ocean. And therefore, here's an example of how we look at the fish cube from an artistic concept, but also from a design perspective. So humans can just between sea level and land, these structures can, for example, be. So kids can be on them, play with them, look through holes, and then in the ocean they have other services. So this is how it began, and then what you see today at the exhibition is then the result of those conceptual exercises, and that build upon a lot of science, but also aesthetics. There's of course always a lot of aesthetical decisions made, and there we and Ricardo and the team have worked so long together, so there's a very strong bond between us. So this is really the Fish Cube is really a shared project, and let's see where it takes us.
Is collaboration difficult, or is it easy for you, Ricardo?
It's fun. Yes, I think it's. Björn said that he doesn't know how to do it any other way from his 31 years. I guess we in our office we think a bit the same way. No, we try to of course, there's always decisions that need to be taken, but and those are not necessarily collective decisions. But the idea of working or exploring these methodologies of getting kids to make models and then try to work with these models, or using statistics. We've also done that with Superflex, where we classify people's interests and then try to derive some functional or design aspect of a particular project. I think those things are fun. I mean, that's why we engage with Superflex, and that's why we like to work collaboratively. Yeah.
And I'll ask again, does anyone have a question or comment that they'd like to share? And so I think this is also my last question, but so if we understand that we have this special responsibility as human beings, that we have to not only listen to other species, but then, think of their interests and act in their way, how can we take that responsibility, and in the work that you do, both you, Ricardo, and Björn in Superflex, how can you take that responsibility, and what kind of work can we do to actively make this different future possible, where maybe we're not just making art for fish for the near future, but maybe just for a very distant future. But what kind of responsibility can we take up in order to change what our future can look like?
Do you want to go first, Björn?
Sure. Like first of all, again, just challenge every perspective, challenge every power system that is out there. They are all social constructions, so we can modify, we can change them if we want to. But of course, we need concrete ideas that enables us to engage with certain perspectives. So, for example, interspecies campus. So, at a university where everyone is studying heavily for 5-7 years and so on, being able to set not only a tone but also create structures that are sometimes super annoying. You have to really walk like that to go into your auditorium, to the cafeteria, and so on. So that's a little bit of annoyance, and then there's even a contract that says, hey, you have to think about interspecies ethics. And then we motivate the teachers, the students, and so on to also take it serious. So you write about it, you theorize about it, but you also walk from one to the other. There are 8 or 10 of them now spread out through the whole campus. So it is to really do what we do as artists. It is to create those settings, and with Ricardo and architects and so forth. But again, it's also then to actually make bricks that you can build normal structures with, or not normal, but buildings with. And therefore, you then challenge the industries. And this then becomes a collective effort where everyone is actually being motivated to be involved because there is no excuse. Because you can use clay and sand and fire, and then you have bricks. Or you can choose to do them a little bit differently. You just need to be motivated, persuaded. And this is what we can do at every level, like every human, every collective, every if you decide only to listen to humans, that's all right. But if you like to give it a little go further, then you must and can do that. But you need to be motivated. And maybe not through religion, maybe or capitalism and so on, but through the collective power that exists.
And you, Ricardo, what do you think?
Well, Björn mentioned, so of course often our role is to put some of these things into the world, as in making them reality. And I talked about the fun of the collaborative processes, but the work at our office is often going towards how to build these many of these things you saw here today, and
Thank you for that.
and that's also, it's exciting, it's hard work, it's very difficult, right? Because how can you, we try to work with most of the time with normal contractors, with, like Björn said, brake manufacturers, or with the stone industry, and how can you persuade people to do things in a different manner, and also how can you question the economical structure of doing that, right? Because of course, if you spend a lot of resources, it may be a little easier, but most of these projects that we do are not exactly done in that way, right? So we are also challenging or trying to resolve economical aspects. I mean, when we design a shape like this, for instance, where we use 100% of the stone, this means that we get more for the money, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just an artistic expression, or there's also an economical or like a material or a technology discussion as well. And that's we've so far been fortunate to find the right partners to do these projects with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that mix of the concern for making something that's economic, that has an economic idea behind it, that we can take advantage of the most surface, and at the same time can be a beautiful piece of art and is listening to the species, and then also this idea of recognizing and giving voice to not just different species, but this movie was quite impressive that you just showed the clip, the Kwasa Kwasa. yeah, that's very, very beautiful work. And I think there was something that whether we have little time or long time left on this earth as human beings, that we can definitely be responsible for making it the best time that we can. Yeah, and I think the work that you do shows that. And it's a beautiful commitment. And if no, does anyone else? Last chance for questions, commentaries? No? Okay, then I thank you. And I thank you, Bjorn. It's lovely to see you again.
Sure, thanks.
And thank you, Ricardo. Yeah.